Sandy Hook, if you couldn't pass new gun laws after that, then nothing's going to happen. But what I think I want people to realize is that in the 7 years since then, and really in the aftermath of the terrible but failed Senate vote where we couldn't get background checks out of the U.S. Senate, a really strong movement has developed. We're part of that. We're not all of it. And where that movement has exercised power is really in changing state policy. It's also in developing really innovative and well-funded, well, needs to be better funded, but starting to be funded violence prevention interruption programs all across the country. So when you think about where we've been, I've been working in Virginia politics. I know Sean's been working for a long time in that as well. This year in Virginia, we passed over 12 important gun violence prevention laws. That took over a decade of activism, but it happened and things changed. And so from my view, because of committed activism, the work of our group, but also thousands of other committed activists, we're starting to majorly change state policy. One of the main things I've been involved with are extreme risk protection orders. That's some people call it the red flag law, the ability to remove firearms for people who are dangerous to self or others. We got that passed recently in 18 states in the District of Columbia. It's an incredible accomplishment. So we're doing a lot at the state level based on sort of the public health and equity angles from this. Lots more to do at the federal level.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Josh. And it's a great pivot because I want to turn to Sean. With the failures we've had at the federal level, I wonder if you might talk a little bit about what you think is possible in Virginia and how the conversation is evolving in Virginia and what the future might look like that way.
Yeah, and thanks for everyone for having me. As Josh said, this was an amazing performance. I was honored just to be a part and get to listen to it. I'm Sean Perryman. I am the president of the Fairfax County NAACP until tomorrow, and then we'll have a new president. So one more day, but definitely a lame duck, and I'm running for lieutenant governor here in Virginia. As Josh mentioned, we passed a number of important legislation here in Virginia to stop gun violence, but I always look at gun violence prevention as much broader. When we talk about some of the root causes, when we talk about gang violence and those sort of things, we really have to address the poverty aspect of it. We have to address the educational aspect, the root cause of why we see gun violence. Those are one way. That's one way that we're doing it. So I look at the legislation as much broader than just things that mention guns. But I do think there's a conversation to be had about the things that did not pass the last session of in Virginia, which includes an assault rifle ban, things of that nature. So right now, I know many of people are preparing for session. I'm talking to gun violence prevention advocates to see what is the legislation they want to see happen. One of the ways we fell short last session was on an assault rifle ban, but we do need to take a comprehensive look at how do we get into communities and make sure that we are addressing the root causes that lead to this violence as well.
That's great. Before we go on, I want to say that in a few moments, we will open up the conversation to the rest of the audience. If you have a question that you'd like to ask, you can type it into the chat to Ariel, and she will go through and either ask it for you if you prefer, or will unmute you and allow you to direct the question directly to these two gentlemen. We'll do that in just a few minutes, but you can start sending those questions to Ariel now, and she'll start sort of amassing her list as best she can. But I wanted to, one of the things that I love about these 7 plays is that they look at so many different angles of this issue. I think often we fall into the conversation because of the rise of mass shootings that we see, but that still accounts for a relatively small percentage of the gun violence in our country. And it becomes hard for us, I think, who are following along to understand where we can best have impact. And I wonder if either of you or both of you might speak to some of the tangible ways in which we can pass laws, in ways in which we can strengthen our communities and have real impact on reducing gun violence right now.
Well, I'll start where Sean left off and say I think there's a couple ways to think about this. One is you've got to deal with the systemic inequities in our culture. So that goes from poverty to lack of healthcare to lack of housing to employment. These are all well-known risk factors for gun violence. And when you look at communities that are economically, oftentimes intentionally economically deprived, you're going to see the same, where you see these levels of, for instance, education inequality or income inequality. You also see gun violence inequality, and you see those are the things that happen in community, these are these risk factors, and we've got to address these. I mean, I think many times intentional inequities in society. I think people are becoming realizing that, but those are things we can do by investing in communities, and we definitely need to be doing that. So there's a lot of policy does that. There's also people power who invest in that and listen to people and volunteering. Those things really matter. There's a lot of research says the more just programs we have in communities, the better these communities are going to be. But there's also ways to jump in on the policy side of that. We have a session coming up in Virginia, and I will tell you that the people who support gun rights will be out there. They'll be out there in force. They'll be emailing and calling. If you want to get involved with that, you can, the Coalition Stop Gun Violence, where I work, and our sister organization, the Educational Fund to Stop Gun Violence, deeply involved in Virginia politics. If you email us, the address is at our website, we will hook you up with letters and when things are happening and how to get involved. But and we have a very important, and so the session's coming up in January. And this sounds incredible. And we just got the election, certified today for Joe Biden. There's another election coming up in Virginia, and you got to vote. You absolutely have to vote in your local election. There's no substitute for getting senators, delegates, lieutenant governor who care about gun violence prevention. We're starting in the right direction, but we have a lot of ground to make up. So I would say addressing the root causes of inequality, getting involved in your local legislation on policy matters around guns, and voting. Those are three small things, not small, these are three very important things. They're not all to do, but I'll say those are three things. And Sean, I'm sure you have some other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think that's one way to get involved. And when we talk about getting at the root cause, organizations like the NAACP, people don't think about us as gun violence prevention, but it's getting involved in communities, being mentors, and getting involved before violence happens is often so key. There's also the issue of a lot of gun violence is actually suicide, and how do we stop that from happening? And we have to be careful here because we don't want to stigmatize mental illness. A lot of times people say mental illness and they assume that those are the people that commit gun violence. But we do have evidence-based things that we can look at to predict when people would commit violence, and it's reducing their opportunities to get guns. So that's domestic abusers, drug intervening earlier with drug abuse and that sort of thing. So I think we need to be smart about our public policy and also how we support people. Right now, more so than ever, everyone is going through that same issues with the pandemic, and how do we support one another, and how do we spend our tax dollars wisely to make sure we're investing in communities. All of these things are part of gun violence prevention. And then I can't say this, as an NAACP president and being here and looking at the last year of what we talked about when it relates to police reform. Police gun violence is gun violence too. And so we need to make sure we're intervening there as well to make sure that officers aren't using guns unnecessarily. Most of that is happening disproportionately to Black and brown individuals. So we need to make sure we intervene there as well. And that's that sort of reform policy that we push for at the NAACP absolutely relates to gun violence, because that is a form of violence.
And I'll just throw in there, Sean, that Hillary Shelton, who's the Washington director of the NAACP, is on our board. So it's definitely an interrelated issue.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, that the issues feed each other. And I think one of the things that, as I say, was so inspiring about these young voices, they seem to get that in so many ways. That these were 7 plays that were about so many things, and gun violence is a symptom of so many things. And I want to sort of address that, because I know that often in the hopelessness of things ever changing, many of us have found inspiration in that next generation. And I wonder if you both might speak to what is it that we're seeing? Are we seeing what we think we're seeing here of a generation that truly is seeing the issue differently and is calling for change in a way that we haven't seen before? And when you all talk to young folks or work with the young folks, what is it that you're seeing coming up through them?
Sean, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I would say I think it's absolutely true. You know, on the campaign, many of my volunteers and staff are younger folks, and it maybe this is not even my part, but it just occurred to me when with working with them that they have been in this sort of culture of mass shootings since they started school. So the Columbine shooting was the first one, and I was in probably going into high school at that point, at 99, 2000, about to go into high school. So I grew up on the tail end of that. Now I'm looking at, I'm meeting young people who they're from the time they were in kindergarten, they were doing shelter in place drills and how to hide from shooters. And that leaves an indelible mark. And it's no surprise to me to see the art that this inspires because these young people are going through this and living through that culture. So I think that this is something that this generation is going to be uniquely attuned to, and seeing honestly the failure of adults my age and older to do anything about it. So I think that this generation is going to be really interesting to see as they get into policy positions, as they get into power, what they do and how they change things.
And, I just add that the young people that we work with and, are so hungry for knowledge, so that my team at the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence is constantly doing educational outreach, constant requests for, how does this issue work? The March for Our Lives kids and others have formed these lobbying collectives where they're working together to really prepare for the upcoming assembly and the legislative sessions. And they are just hungry for knowledge in ways that I haven't seen. And they when you talk about advocacy, what it means to change things, they take facts, they take a public health approach, but they wrap it in their own personal narrative, and that changes people's minds. And they've done a great job with that. And I think the young people are incredibly passionate and organized about this issue.
And I think also with this generation too, it's just they have the mediums that are so different that they can reach each other, organize better. It's amazing because you really have this platform now that the Columbine kids and the kids after that didn't have. So I think that will be interesting to see over the years how that affects advocacy.
I love that. I want to make sure we get some times for the audience to ask some questions as well. So Ariel, I'm going to reach out to you. We have a question from the audience.
Hello, we have a couple of questions. The first question we have is, what, if anything, can Mr. Perryman do as Lieutenant Governor to move legislation forward?
Yeah, so the Lieutenant Governor cannot introduce legislation, but here's why it's an important position. And I'm sure that Josh is uniquely attuned to this, is that we are in a 21-19 state Senate. And it's always been a pretty close state Senate, and the Lieutenant Governor breaks ties. And we will probably see some tie-breaking votes, especially as we push more on gun prevention legislation. So the Lieutenant Governor, and through his constitutional duties, can break those ties. And it's very crucial that you have a vote that is strong on this issue. But more so, I've been looking at the position as a platform to push on policy. So even though you can't introduce legislation, there's no reason you can't champion it, push those issues, and work with your colleagues to get that done. And that's what I hope to do on this issue and many more.
There's no one more powerful when the Senate split, for instance, if this is frequent on a 2020 vote, than the Lieutenant Governor. I've had the Lieutenant Governor not many times, but several times call me and say, hey, you want my vote on this? You got to do X, Y, and Z. And at that point, you got to do it because there's a lot of power when things are 2020. And I would also say, I don't know if, Alex, you cut me off. I'm getting too political here, but for many of you who live in Fairfax, your Senator's Chap Peterson, and he's a Democrat, but he votes with the
I would argue with you on that one.
Yeah, okay, right. Okay. How about Sean? He puts a D next to his name. That's about all we'll say, right? But he actually votes for the gun lobby a lot. So we end up in a lot of 2020 situations in the Senate. And so voting matters. Having a Lieutenant Governor who will vote the right way on this really matters. So there's a lot that a Lieutenant Governor can do on this issue.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Ariel, do you have other question?
I do. We have a question from Jacob. Jacob, I'm going to unmute you so that you can go ahead and ask.
Great. Hi, thank you guys so much. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I didn't see my video. So we just got out of perhaps the most partisan election in history, and it seems like the sides, instead of actually coming together and compromising, everybody's digging further into their own, original positions. With that in mind, what are some of the best ways that you think are that we can reach out to the other side, like those who very much want to protect their Second Amendment rights? It's sort of easy, I feel like, to throw bombs and to be argumentative, but I feel like something else has got to work because, like you said, on the federal level, nothing has changed since Sandy Hook, and it's demoralizing and depressing to me. So I just want to see what are the ways that we can actually reach out. Are there ways? I don't know.
I think there are. I think there are at least two issues where we can get some bipartisan support. One is suicide prevention and things like lethal means counseling, especially when it comes to our veterans. We don't have a lot of our providers who work with veterans don't have the tools to counsel veterans often. We don't have, the right storage facility if someone does want to say, store their gun somewhere while they're having an issue. So I think there's and there's just, healthcare providers need the right tools for suicide prevention. There's a lot of good material on that, but people need to be trained on how to intervene when it matters, trained on how to get a gun out of someone's hands when it really matters. So I think there's some suicide prevention. There's also projects where gun stores are giving out materials and working with purchasers to be warning them about the signs of suicide. So there are definitely a number of opportunities in suicide prevention. I think where you can reach out across the aisle. And the other part is I really believe there'll be funding for violence intervention programs, funding for hospital intervention programs. These are programs that get young people out in the streets working with other people. Oftentimes people who have been involved, for instance, have been formerly incarcerated, but now are working to improve their lives, can improve their own community. We need, there's resources available there needs to be resources available for violence interruption programs. People call them like ceasefire programs or cure violence. We need to replicate these things all over the country. And I do think that there will be ways to reach across the aisle for these things. And where there's not, I think some of the prevention policies that we're talking about are now getting more and more popular every day. And I think we can just win on issues. So I think there's some opportunities to move the issue forward, both through collaboration and sometimes just going with what's right and getting that done.
Yeah, to follow up on that, in my campaign, what I've really put forward, I say the ease, education, equity, economics, I think that speaks to everyone. And so some of the issues I'm talking about that I think there's real support for reaching across the aisle is broadband access. How do we get people back to work, those sort of things. What does that have to do with gun prevention? Because the way I link all these things, I think these things are interrelated, is if you're providing people better access, like with broadband access, in rural Virginia, where their hospitals are being shut down at an alarming rate, when we talk about the intervention programs, we talk about getting people counseling, that sort of thing. Broadband access is a lot of times a critical link to some of those things. I think if we're telling people that we are investing in them and then not trying to criminalize them, but instead trying to help them out so that, like we said, suicide prevention being one of the largest incidents of gun violence, these are the things that we have to intervene in. So it's talking to people about the sort of the kind of nuts and bolts of how do we help you? How do we get people access to the things they need? How does government help you rather than hurt you? So many of these things are so partisan now, but I think broadband access, things like that, the way you frame this and couch this is that you, as a person who's in government, is trying to help. So that's at least how I view this thing.
That's great. I see we're kind of low on time, but I want to, my hope is that these readings inspire us and inspire us to act. So I want to take a moment and ask you each to talk about ways in which folks like our audience here might get involved with your organizations, and what kinds of things you need help with. So Josh, you want to go first?
Yeah, so I run the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. We think gun violence should be rare and abnormal. We take a public health and equity approach to that, which means that we want to make sure that we use the best public health research on this, and we also want to make sure that we're addressing the root causes of violence. And for us, resources mean donations. They mean coming to our lobby days, which are a little difficult this year because of COVID, but really sign up for our action alerts, getting on our newsletter, helping us support us financially. And those are things that really make a difference. And if you live here in Virginia, most I think people on this call do, getting involved in this legislative session really, really matters. Calling, emailing, writing, those things matter. Made a difference, and they put pressure not just on your legislatures, but in the whole General Assembly. So I would say for getting involved, our website is csgv.org, Coalition Stop Gun Violence, csgv.org. And we're happy to connect you with the right folks in Virginia to get involved, both in the grassroots organizing, and just, it's towards the end of the year. We need your support. Your support helps our organization, but we're also, I think, one of the only gun violence prevention organizations that also uses our resources to help build state level action across the country. We're really proud of that. And so we think we're good stewards of your financial resources and use resources in a very unique way to build up and support what we've done in Virginia, which is great grassroots activism.
Sean?
Yeah, and to get involved with the Fairfax NAACP, anyone can become a member. It's $30 to join the branch. You can get involved. We have pretty much everything's broken into committees. We do education, political action. We have veterans affairs. You name it, we pretty much have an issue area that covers it. And I always tell people, one, anyone of any race can join, but two, we need all sorts of talents and skills. If you're a lawyer, we need lawyers. If you're a carpenter, we need carpenters. We need DJs. We need everything, because we do so much in the community that you can contribute in some way that you're probably not even thinking as a skill, but it is, because we need those people to get involved. And it's really community building. It's helping have those levels of support for someone. Just last month, we gave out 25,000 diapers to our local shelter, just because in this time of, where food pantries are around the corner and people are going to shelters, it's organizations like the NAACP that's been in the area for 102 years that really can come to the forefront and help folks. And when you contribute to the NAACP, either as a member or through donating at the branch level, we don't have any overhead. I'm not paid. None of the executive staff is paid. This is a volunteer organization. Those dollars and your time go towards the mission. So I always encourage people to join the NAACP. We talked a little bit about the importance of the lieutenant governor role. Obviously, after tomorrow, I'll be moving on to that, and you can follow that at perrymanforvirginia.com. We need people who are strong on these issues, who understand the issues and are willing to fight for it. So that's what I would say, the two ways that you can get involved with the organizations and things that I'm doing.
That's great. We could go on all night, and I would love to. I can't tell you both how much it means for us to be able to take, the issues that show up in our art and be able to have you both bring it back to the real world for us and help connect it to our everyday lives. So I thank you both so much for being with us today, being with for doing the work that you do. We're so grateful to you, and we'll look forward to seeing you hopefully back in the theater for some community conversation, on the stage as it's meant to be soon.
Can't wait.
Yeah, same here. Thanks, everyone. This has been great, but I can't wait to get it in person.
Thank you all. Thank you all for being here. There's more information about the Enough readings and organization on our website. And of course, in the chat, you can find the information about the Fairfax NAACP and the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. I urge you to check out their websites as well. If I don't see you all before, I wish you all a very happy holidays. Thank you for being with us over these last 9 months, and hopefully we'll see you in person soon. Thank you all.
Bye.